let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely wild, how a whole ideology completely transformed. We're talking about a journey from dark web rumors and historical accusations all the way into a legally recognized mainstream organization. It is literally a shift from the deep shadows straight into the spotlight of modern society. To really get a grip on this complex shift, we're going to follow a pretty clear roadmap. First, we'll look at the mainstream rise of the temple. Then, trace the historical roots. See the move from underground to organized religion. Check out its normalization through pop culture, how it's reaching the next generation, and finally, wrap up with the philosophy of the self.
All right, Section 1, Mainstream Rise of the Temple, a New Era.
So, over 700,000. Now you might be wondering, what does that number mean? Well, it actually represents the current membership of a flourishing, real-world organization. This isn't just some internet fiction. The source points out that, under the 2023 U.S. Supreme Court framework, this group actually holds registered, official religious status. I mean, they've got chapters in over 50 cities, their own legal teams, and even a TV channel.
And this perfectly illustrates a massive juxtaposition the source talks about. You know, when most of us hear the word Satanism, we picture isolated outcasts in dark clothing with weird aesthetics, kind of like the Church of Satan back in 1966, but that's the past. Modern Satanism, spearheaded by the Satanic Temple, is entirely different. We're talking about highly organized, legally savvy people wearing suits, fighting high-profile legal battles, and looking completely, perfectly normal. That normalization, that's the core focus of what we're looking at today.
Moving on to Section 2, Tracing the Historical Roots, a Centuries-Old Shift.
So how exactly did we get to these suit-wearing temple leaders? Well, the source highlights a timeline that kicks off way back in 1307. Back during the Crusades, there were these totally fabricated accusations leveled against the wealthy Knights Templar. Then, if we jump to the 1800s, Europe saw this huge shift with romantic poets like Shelley and Milton. They actually started framing Satan not as a monster, but as a rebel hero standing up to an oppressive monarch. And then, landing in 1871, we see some highly influential writings from Freemason Albert Pike. Now, it's absolutely crucial to understand the evolution of this specific imagery. Baphomet, you've probably seen it, was originally a 14th century slur. It was basically a baseless accusation King Philip of France used just to seize the Knights Templars' massive wealth. But fast forward 700 years, and that exact same half-human, half-animal figure was deliberately reclaimed. It was turned into a massive 9-foot statue by the Satanic Temple, specifically to demand equal space next to a Ten Commandments monument at the Oklahoma State Capitol. Talk about a crazy pivot, right? Which brings us to the intellectual foundation. According to the analysis, writings like this 1871 quote from Albert Pike show how elite intellectual circles meticulously constructed this ideology. They didn't view the devil as some literal, physical beast with a pitchfork. No, they viewed it as a symbol, a force for absolute personal autonomy and free will. It was a carefully crafted philosophical stance that just kind of simmered in literary and elite circles for decades.
Okay, Section 3, Underground to Organized Religion, the 20th Century Transition.
Let's zoom forward and see how these high-minded philosophical ideas turned into organized and sometimes violently extreme movements. In 1966, Anton LaVey, who was actually a former circus worker, established the Church of Satan in San Francisco. He dropped the Satanic Bible, and the opening statement explicitly pushed back against any traditional religious restraints. The whole focus was on indulging the self instead of practicing abstinence or self-control. Basically, suppressing your desires was framed as being cruel to yourself.
But as the source notes, things took a much darker turn. It contrasts the LaVey's philosophical approach with the 1990s Norwegian black metal scene. And this wasn't just edgy philosophy anymore. This was the rise of theistic Satanism, meaning the actual worship of a real entity. And it had devastating real-world consequences, leading to documented murders and the literal burning of over 50 churches across Scandinavia. It was extreme, it was violent, and it was fiercely underground.
This brings us to Section 4, Normalization through Pop Culture, the Modern Hook.
That dark, underground extremism leads right into the most fascinating pivot in this whole explainer. How these concepts moved away from burning churches and are now completely sanitized and normalized for everyday audiences. 200 million. That's the estimated number of people who tuned into the 2023 Grammy Awards during primetime. And during that global broadcast, audiences watched incredibly famous artists perform a song featuring literal, undeniable devil-themed imagery and red horns. And this source makes it clear that this isn't an isolated event. It's a massive pattern. Think about streaming hits with millions of subscribers. You've got Netflix's Lucifer running for 6 seasons, presenting the devil as this charming, funny, relatable hero, or Sabrina, where a satanic academy is basically framed as female empowerment. We're even seeing consumer goods, like Lil Nas X's Satan shoes, that literally had a drop of real blood in the sole. They sold out all 666 pairs in a matter of minutes. The analysis argues that we are way past mere shock value here. It's a calculated, step-by-step normalization of the aesthetic, right up until the public doesn't even blink at it anymore.
Which naturally leads us to Section 5, reaching the next generation, the educational shift. Because, you see, the analysis doesn't stop at pop culture and sneakers. It tracks how this normalization explicitly targets much younger demographics. We're actually seeing the rollout of after-school Satan clubs operating in 7 American states right now, and they're doing it by using incredibly sound, airtight legal arguments, by arguing that they deserve the exact same school access as Christian clubs. Based on Supreme Court rulings, these organizations are seamlessly introducing coloring books and literature directly into educational ecosystems and public libraries.
Finally, Section 6, the philosophy of the self, the ultimate goal.
Let's tie all of this history, legal maneuvering, and entertainment together to see the underlying philosophical engine driving this whole movement. The Satanic Temple operates on 7 tenets, and honestly, when you read them, they sound incredibly reasonable. Act with compassion and empathy. Belief should conform to the best scientific understanding. The body is inviolable, which perfectly mirrors today's popular slogans about bodily autonomy. But the source points out a massive deliberate omission here. There is absolutely no mention of a creator, no mention of God, no higher accountability whatsoever. The core function of these tenets is to completely strip away any external authority, leaving absolutely nothing but the human ego. The explainer maps this out brilliantly using a theological framework, specifically referencing Surah al-Isra from Islamic texts. It shows how influence is systematically pushed through 3 distinct channels. First, voice, which translates today to modern media, streaming algorithms, and Grammy performances. Second, wealth, aligning perfectly with modern capitalism and consumerism, like those sold-out blood shoes. And third, children, mapping directly to those after-school programs and library literature. It's a pretty wild parallel, right? So the ultimate takeaway the source really wants you to grasp is this concept that self is God. This modern movement, it's not about bowing down to a red-horned beast in a dark basement. It's actually an ideology designed to trick humanity into worshiping their own validation, their own logic, and their own desires above literally anything else. It is the ultimate elevation of arrogance and the self.
Which makes me want to pose a few questions to you. Is religion really just a personal boundary, a totally private item? And is your body entirely your own to do whatever you please with, totally free from any higher moral framework? The explainer suggests that if you already believe absolute personal autonomy and logic are the highest ultimate truths, well then the core values of this ideology have already quietly reached your home.
And honestly, that's the true danger outlined in the source. We're not dealing with an underground cult that's going to knock on your front door and hand you a pamphlet to convert you. No way. Instead, the ideology is simply normalized. It's piped directly into your living room through glowing screens, carefully curated music playlists, and social media algorithms, slowly and quietly erasing the lines of absolute morality in favor of pure personal indulgence.
The source presents a really fascinating and, according to its authors, deeply unsettling look at modern media and society. It leaves us with one final lingering question. As we continuously consume this highly normalized, beautifully packaged culture of self-worship, who or what is truly shaping our values? I'm going to leave you to think about that. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.